Let's jump right into it. Sprint races. We're all set to. It seems like we have a green light to just go ahead and get started with our sprint races. That's the three things that. What is it? Silverstone, Monza, and Imola Silverstone, Monza, and Interlagos have in common that they are
sprint races.
They're potentially going to be sprint races.
But that is not why I asked you that question.
I read that earlier as well.
But that's not why I asked you that question.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the sprint races first. So, Yhancy, do you care to break down some of that news for us, please?
Yes. So, the issue with the sprint races was more financially. This is why they couldn't agree on it. They wanted to do it, but they were arguing about the kind of money that they get.
Why did they need more money?
Because just in case something happens, obviously there's a lot of cost to run these cars, especially if you add another race or event to it. So there's costs associated with that. But on top of that, there's also costs associated if something happens, like if somebody crashes their car or you have an incident during the race where a car hits another car and damage is done. They have to compensate to replace those parts and so on and so on. So the original, what teams wanted, or the bigger teams wanted originally, was an extra $1 million each team.
You did that the wrong way, Doug.
What?
1 million.
Well,
$1 million.
$1 million.
Pinky up to the.
$1 million to compensate for those costs. A lot of the teams, a lot of the smaller teams, obviously said that was too much money. I mean, that was too little. Or it was too much. I think it was too much money. So, what they did was that instead of, it was F1 that's giving the money to the teams. I just want to clarify that. So they said that it was too little. The smaller teams said that was too little money to compensate, especially when they have to, go through extra events. So what the compromise was that they would get an extra $500,000 and they would raise the cost cap by another $500,000 to get to that $1 million figure. Now the other caveat is if there is too much damage, let's say there's a big crash and the expenses are way more than that, then they have a leeway to change that cost cap to whatever that team needs, so nobody is disadvantaged in any way.
So I want to understand one thing. You're saying they're going to provide funds to the team. Is that per race?
No, that's just for those 3 specific races. So it's a pool of money, $500,000 for any extra cost that can incur during those 3 sprint races.
So
is it per race?
No, it's not per race. It's just a pool of money for those 3 races.
So it's $500,000 to cover the cost of all 3 races?
Yes.
Okay.
Plus...
Doesn't seem like a lot.
Plus the raising of the cost cap. I have to say that slowly because I always get confused. Cast cop. You see, you messed me up. The cost cap. So they have more money to work with within their own budget.
I thought it was $1.5 million because $500,000 for all 3 races. I had to reread what you were talking.
Yeah, no, but it's for all 3 races.
So it's only $500,000 again. Well, $1 million essentially altogether.
$1 million
essentially
altogether. Yes.
$500,000 given by F1, and also the cost cap has been raised by $500,000.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. So my opinion from early changes. So earlier would say, "Oh, this is like a major change." No, it's not that much money. It's not gonna.
So this is replacing. It's a 100-kilometer race. Is it replacing qualifying?
No, qualifying will happen on Saturday. No, I'm sorry, on Friday instead of Saturday. So there'll be practice 1. Then a qualifying session, which will set the grid for the sprint race.
There you go.
And then the results of the sprint race will set the grid
for the Sunday race. And points are awarded. I don't think they've finalized it, but what they were talking about was they got half the points, and it's only the top 8 teams, I believe.
So top 10?
Yeah, top 8, not top 10. I think it's top 8.
Complicated. It has to be complicated. Everything has to be looked at, every angle, blah, 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 blah. But
yeah, there's still some things that have to be ironed out, but it seems like that's what they're moving towards. And it will be at Monza, Silverstone,
Monza, and
Interlagos.
Sorry, you're right.
So, but that's not what they have in common.
That's
What
it's-
do they have in common? I'm sorry. You asked that question. He asked Yhancy before we started recording. Asked the question: what do Silverstone, Monza, and Interlagos have in
So
common?
think about why is it that they're going to do it at these venues?
Those are nice, big overtake style tracks.
Boom.
Yeah.
So if this is going to work, obviously you're going to have the opportunities to overtake and make it fun for the fans. Because at the end of the day, this is just so they can shake up the grid. Even though we've talked about this before, it doesn't really seem like it will shake up the grid, just the way the format is. It could, but not really. Because the top teams are still going to... There's no reverse grid, so it's still... It's going to be the top teams, going through and getting the points, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what you do have a chance is some teams moving up the field if you can tune the car differently or set up the car differently. So you have a chance of overtaking so that you're not limited like a Monaco or Albert Park before where you couldn't really overtake.
So, but there are certain teams, and I'm going to use the name from last year, like Racing Point, for example. They were tuned much better for the race pace than they were for qualifying pace. So I feel like that's going to hurt teams that are set up in that direction, we'll call it. But should be. So the primary setup for Racing Point from last year was so that they can do well over the course of the race, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a guy, for example, Sergio Perez, who's great on his tires, who maximized the time on the track during the race and maybe not so much over qualifying over one lap, you focus more on reliability. You don't focus so much on, let me get the most out of that car for my one lap section or for my 100 kilometers, whatever. You're focused more on the length of
this race.
Yeah, exactly. So
as opposed to a Mercedes, which is usually tuned to do better in qualifying so they can be ahead.
And being clean air.
There are other teams that they know that they can't qualify high up, so they set up their car so they can have a better race pace, meaning better times overall over a certain amount of laps instead of just that one lap pace.
Yeah, so I'm excited for it. I'm just very nervous in the sense that there are precious few tracks, like Yhancy alluded to, that would allow for good sprint races, not just this year, but going forward. So they've made some changes to some of the aero coming into this year that has already played a part in last week's race or 2 weeks ago's race to allow for better overtaking, better following, etc. We haven't seen how it plays out over the course of the full season. So I'm concerned on, is it actually better? Did they break a couple of things? And the sprint races, I don't know. To me, we'll see how it shakes out.
But I think this is why they're doing it. It's a trial, basically. I mean, if it works, if this format works, you can see it expanding. But the only reason they have tried things before to change up the weekend format, but it hasn't been as extensive as it is now. They're doing it at 3 races. They're going to have the data of 3 races and the results of 3 races to see if it works or not. Usually, when F1 makes a change, usually they make that change for one season, or let's say the 2017 rules. Let's go with the aero rules where they made the cars wider, longer, the wheels bigger. They wanted to make these cars faster, but it just wound up, they're faster per lap, but you can't overtake.
Yeah.
So this is a way for F1 or FOM to get data to see if this format works so they can expand. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does, there's no guessing game as if it was going to work or not. Because all we've been doing in the past is dealing with hypotheticals and saying, oh, this is going to work or this might not work, or we don't really know if it's going to work or not because we haven't tried it we haven't tried it physically.
Yeah.
And the only way to get actual physical tangible results is to actually try it, especially, and you can't really do that in this age because obviously there's cost involved in running a car. Most of the testing is not even done in the car like it used to be before. It's done through CFD, computer fluid dynamics, which is basically, and what teams are doing now in testing is making sure that their data in the computer matches the on-track data, because the on-track data is so precious because it's very limited.
Right. So what's been a big factor, and specifically in Bahrain, the last couple of times they've been there, crosswinds, right? So when you talk about the computational fluid dynamics and all that data, you're in a vacuum. So everything is perfect, ideal, like, okay, everything is going to work and it's going to be nice, but then you don't have a crosswind. You don't have cars that you're following or cars
that are right next
to you behind, like it's
or a broken wing or something, it's a trial, but it's something that I'm happy that they're doing it. Again, this is my opinion. I don't think it's going to shake up the field. But we never know until we try it. And that's what we got to do. We got to try it.
No, that's the best way to try it. They tried it in 3 tracks. They're not doing it's not like a new rule that you're putting across the board. Like, no, but we haven't tried it. No.
Right. And at tracks that promote overtaking.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, we want to be entertained. And this is what it's going to do. Are you not entertained?
Hey guys, this is Wellington from the Jump to Start Racing crew. Before we start, I want to make sure to tell you to destroy that like button and to make sure to hit subscribe to be up to date with our episodes and clips. Please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle on both platforms is @JumpTheStartF1. See you there.